Hello, Veteran Outdoorsman here again, and I am going to show you not the only way, but one way to sharpen a knife. Now, a lot of guys have trouble getting knives sharp, and what I'm going to show you is a way to get a knife shaving sharp. Where it clips hairs, just like that, and shaves a nice smooth patch on your arm. Now this one probably needs touched up just a bit, but it's not bad. So, let's get started. What you're going to need, good sharpening stone. I prefer a multi-grit stone. You can get the Arkansas and different wet stones that are fine on one side, coarse on the other. I don't like them as much, but they'll certainly work. What I like is this, and it's really cheap, this Diamond Life. It's from Harbor Freight. It's got a stand. It's got multiple grits. You can see 600, 400, 200, 300. So it goes from coarse to fine. And it's a really good stone, in my opinion. I have heard some mixed reviews about these stones. That's fine. Let me set you just a little bit higher here. Just a second. That'll work a little better. I've heard some mixed reviews, and that's okay. Some people don't like cheaper products. These were not very expensive at all, but mine works pretty well. You get a chance, you're at Harbor Freight, look at one, see if it's got any flaws. I've heard some have gobs of diamonds on them that cause gouges in their knife blades, things like that. But, get you a multi-grit stone. If you really, really struggle with it, I would suggest a Lansky kit that's got a jig and puts a nice edge on them. I've used those with Arkansas and with diamond stones. They work really well. They're not very time consuming. But to just use a plain stone, a diamond stone, a wet stone, I like multiple grits to get a nice edge. What you're going to need, a stone like I just said, some good oil. You can buy honing oil. Some stones you can just use water. I've used personally WD-40 3-in-1 oil. Right now I've been using this Hoppy's gun oil. It works really well. So that's what I'm going to stick with. So we're going to take the stone. I'm going to start 200 grit. And I'm not going to take a lot of passes because it removes a lot of material. But I'm going to apply some oil on here. Take my finger. Kind of broadcast it. You certainly want it all the way from this edge to this edge. All the way down doesn't really matter. You just want the surface that you're going to make your strokes. But if you cover the entire stone, you'll be covered. But you may not necessarily need to do that. But make sure front to back is covered. Certainly the back, because you're going to be coming off the edge, depending on which side you sharpen. You need a knife to sharpen for sure. You wouldn't be sharpening a knife if you didn't have a knife. And a Sharpie magic mark. That you will be able to get away without having, after you've got some experience and you get a feel. But if you're trying to learn how to sharpen knives so that you don't have to pay to have someone sharpen them, invest in a Sharpie. So, this knife actually isn't too bad, but it's got a few little nicks we're going to work out. It's fairly sharp. But, what's the marker for? You've probably heard of this before, but I don't know that I've ever seen it actually demonstrated. So what you're going to do is you're going to carefully mark the edge that you want to sharpen. And if you get a little bit onto the knife edge, onto the main knife, that's okay, because you'll still be able to see the bevel. That's what you want to sharpen. And what you're going to want to do later, and I'll show you how to do this too, as we complete it, is you just take a paper towel or a rag with a little bit of that oil on it, wipe it off, come right off, as long as it's fresh. So what you want to do, you get your knife, you get it marked. You've already oiled your stone. And what you want to do is you want to take it, get about the right angle, make a couple strokes, and then check it. Now see, that's pretty well got the right edge. But you see, if you can tell, there's a few low spots. But what you should be striving for is to remove all the black. You'll be able to tell if you're holding a little high, a little low. And if you've got a slightly uneven bevel, you'll see high spots, low spots. You'll also see some nicks that you need to address. You also see if you're not holding it level throughout the whole stroke. Now that's not too bad. Again, I said this knife was fairly sharp already. So I'm not going to continue on this one. I'm going to show you how sharp it can be by using this method. That's not bad. Do not like that. There's a reason. You put a real fine edge on a knife and you come up above it and just slice through. It looks cool. Then you go back and look at it, especially with a microscope, and you see the little nicks every spot that you hit the paper. You will actually chip a fine edge on the edge of paper by forcing it through. But if you just come like this, and it actually will somewhat polish an edge. But remember, your mom complained about you cutting with her sewing scissors. When you would cut paper with them when you were a kid, do that too much, it will dull the blade. Hair the same way. Anyone that's ever had their wife borrow their razor certainly knows that. But just to check and see how sharp it is. And I developed a reputation when I was in the Army for having scary sharp knives. I also managed to get stitches at least once because of that. Now, there was oil on this, and I've already gotten most of the black off because of that. But like I said, I'll show you how to get the black off. I mean, this is really simple. We're almost done. All you do is color the bevel, then take it off with your stone. I mean, it's that simple. You got a little bit of black, you went over the bevel. Get a little black left on your, or I prefer black. Black seems to be the best color for this. It's also good for putting eyes on baits and things. But just take your oil, rub it off, and it may take a little bit of doing to see how it's coming off. Plus, it doesn't really bother me too much to have a little bit of Sharpie on my knife blade because it wears off eventually, but cleans up pretty well. Again, be careful, you're wiping it with paper towels. That's paper, which is made of wood. You could dull your blade. Now, you want to get an even finer edge. You want to get, you've already got it pretty well razor sharp, but you want to get it scalpel sharp. Here's another couple of tricks. Now for this, you don't want to color the blade, but find that approximate angle. Take a notepad, a nice flat notepad. Now I'm going to wipe the oil off my stone, and there's a reason for that. Also, after you sharpen a handful of knives, take some hot soap and water, clean up your stone. With a terry cloth dish rag, something like that. Gets all the gunk and crevices. You can spray it with brake cleaner, some things like that. You don't want to fill up the stone. It gets filled with gunk, and it doesn't work very well. And that goes for wet stones. That goes, you know, Arkansas stones, synthetic stones, diamond stones. You don't want them all gunked up. Remember, with the synthetic type stone that simulates a Arkansas stone or an Arkansas stone, you also want to dress them up on a flat surface with some sandpaper periodically. But that is a subject for another time. So I'm going to take this notepad. I've got it on a flat surface. And what I'm going to do, and you want it somewhat padded, what I'm going to do is set my approximate angle and go backwards. You say, what is that doing? Well, have you ever seen a professional knife sharpener with a paper wheel on a grinder? You may not be able to see, but there's some marks on there. Paper is abrasive. It actually, remember I said it could dull your knife? It actually sharpens, or it actually takes away some steel. It actually takes away some steel. So, just like a crock stick or an old knife steel, you can use it to get the burr off in a pinch. It would take a lot, but it would work. It would take a lot for that. A few other tricks. Piece of scrap leather, rough side up, put an abrasive on there. You use a fine valve grinding compound. You can use a polishing compound. I'm very partial to Dremel's polishing compound. Looks like a clay. It's brown. Comes in a little vial like that. It's not super cheap, but a little dab will do you. It goes a long way. Take a little glob on your finger, work it onto the leather, put it on a flat surface, backwards again, not forwards, backwards. Forwards, you're going to slice into the leather, backwards, and you'll see the compound turning gray or black. And you go backwards several times, go the other way several times, and it will polish the edge and make a much, much finer, much sharper edge. If you're going to do a lot of work with something like it's a skinning knife, you're boning out a deer, working on some really hard scaled fish like a redfish, some gar, something like that, I recommend using a slightly coarser. I wouldn't go up to 600. I'd go up to maybe 400. Stop there. Still get it shaven sharp, but leave a slightly coarse edge. that allows it to have like saw teeth. And if you look under a microscope or under a magnifying glass, you're going to see like little saw teeth, almost serrations. And that allows you to keep a sharper edge longer. Remember, the finer the grit you use, the finer you polish the edge, the less time it stays that way. Just like sharpening the old broadheads, sharpening the old Bear broadheads, the old Zawickis. I shoot traditional still from time to time. I like the Zawicki broadheads. You know, you sharpen them with a file. I'll go back to with my 200 grit, maybe my 400 grit, and I'll touch them up with that. I want that rough edge though. I do knock the burr off, but I want that rougher edge. Tends to cause a little more hemorrhaging. Penetrates fine. Stays sharper longer. I've polished them down to almost a mirror finish with the leather, stroked them down, put them in the box, put them in my quiver, and a few days later, just from rubbing on the leather in the quiver, they're dull. I don't have that problem leaving a slightly rougher edge. So a sheath knife, you may want to leave a slightly rougher edge. Fillet knife, a butcher knife where you're just cutting meat, you're not cutting through bones, things like that. You know, something you're using on softer things, make that thing nice and fine on a piece of leather. If you don't have the polishing compound, toothpaste will work. But just the leather will help take the burr off. A piece of cork will do the same thing. So some tricks to think about. Also, a ceramic coffee cup or a ceramic plate where you flip it over and you have the rough edge. I'm trying to think if I've got one here. I don't think I do. Don't have it readily available. Maybe I'll do another video with that. You have that rough edge that's not glazed. Flip that over and use it to just finish up. Remember, again, same angles. With that, you will want to use your marker. Mark up your edge. Use it just like a whetstone. Spit on it. Put a little bit of water on it. Don't oil it because you don't want that soaking in and bubbling the glaze off, things like that. A little bit of water's fine. Touch it up. You know, if it starts to wear a little funny, starts to sit funny when you're drinking out of your coffee cup, you can always take some sandpaper on a flat surface, smooth it back up, dress it up just like I had mentioned with other things. Also, and this is a trick you'll see Deer Meat for Dinner use this constantly. I watched an uncle use it while skinning a deer. It works, certainly in a pinch. You know, you're at deer camp. Everybody's got their truck. Roll down the window of your truck. Don't do it to someone else's truck. Roll down the window. You know, leave you a gap. The rough part of the glass at the top of the window makes a nice spot for finishing the edge of a knife. Again, be very careful with the edge. Don't go past the angle. If you've got too shallow of an angle, you're not going to sharpen it. If you go past, you're just going to dull it. You've got to get the angle right. That's where this comes in. And it will knock that black off. And you'll maintain the edge. A lot of times people don't have problem getting a knife nice and sharp, but if you look at it, there's 4 or 5 different bevels on the blade, and it just doesn't look good, but it's sharp. You wear the knife blade out faster doing that too, changing the angles constantly over and over. And you scratch up the blades, different things. We want to keep our tools for as long as we can because we spent good money on them, even on a cheap knife. You know, you want to be able to keep them usable for as long as possible. So, invest in a Sharpie. Depending on the size knife, you know, this size works pretty well for about anything, but a fine tip might work better for you. This works good for hunting knives, things, not so much for fillet knives, but it works in a pinch. Works okay for pocket knives. Works pretty good for this homemade Damascus folder. And I did assemble this. I built it. I bought parts from a company for knife making. I put this together. It's kind of cool with the abalone handle, the Damascus blade. You know, kind of a showpiece. Um, nice in dress clothes. Put that in if you really need to use your knife. You get a dressy knife, pull out. But I just thought it looked cool. Croc sticks are a good investment. Really nice for deburring your blades and getting them to a nice fine edge. In your kit, your hunting pack, your tackle box, something like that, get you a couple of small blades or small stones. They don't have to be oil stones. They don't have to be Arkansas whetstones, things like that. I've got a little ceramic stone that's nice for just finishing stuff up, but it's not a sharpener. It's nice for finishing things up. You know, get you something like a little Smith pocket sharpener. The stone, not the draw through. I'll get into that in a second. Put a couple of them in your tackle box. Put one in your tackle box. Put one in your glove box. Put one in your hunting pack. Put one in your toolbox. You can use it for sharpening fish hooks. You can use it for sharpening knives. Use it for sharpening chisels with your toolbox. You know, those are handy tools to have. Put one in your go bag. You got a 72-hour bag? Put one in there. Put one in your camping gear, you know. You spend 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks. Got a handful of stones. If you don't want to spend that kind of money, if you don't have that kind of money, this is something else you can do, and it works certainly in a pinch. And for just occasionally sharpening, it works just fine. Get you a flat piece of wood. You can find scrap wood just about anywhere. Get you a flat piece of wood or something flat, piece of Lexan, something. Get you some double-sided tape. And get you some 300, 400 grit sandpaper. I prefer the black emery type paper or emery cloth. But regular sandpaper will work, but I prefer the black gritted paper. Get you some double-sided tape, or you can glue it on, but that tends to soak through the paper, so I prefer double-sided tape. Put some double-sided tape on the flat surface. Put your sandpaper on there. Cut it around the edges. Put a couple spare pieces, some more double-sided tape in with your box. Put them in a Ziploc bag or something so they don't get wet. You're out fishing. You ding up your knife. You want to sharpen it real quick. You're out hunting. As you're cutting through the rib cage, you dinged up your knife. You need to sharpen it real quick, something like that. You've got that instead of a bunch of stones all over the place. Maybe you don't want to spend 50 bucks to have a couple of stones in every location. That's fine. You can also use multiple grits of sandpaper, and you can do the same type of thing as I would with this. And it's cheaper, and you can set up more things. It won't last as long, but if you're only using it just for occasional, just for touch-up when you need it, sharpening fish hooks every now and then, something like that, works just fine. Trick for sharpening fish hooks. Take you a piece of sandpaper. This is not sandpaper, but it'll work as a demonstration. Fold it like this. Again, you know, like 300 grit, somewhere along there. Fold it like this. You get that angle? Take your hook, rub the point in. Couple strokes. Check it on your fingernail. It digs in. Good to go. Works very well. I like the Smith pocket sharpener because it's got a fish hook sharpener on it. Got a nice leather pouch. Fits in your pocket. Fits in your back pocket. Fits in your front pocket. Fairly unobtrusive. Fits nicely in glove box, tackle box, hunting pack, etc. Those are nice. They're not horribly expensive either. Having a few of those around, good thing. Now, I mentioned not a draw-through sharpener. A lot of guys are going, well, that's the only way I can get a knife sharp. If you're stuck on that, that's fine. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I do, and I'll tell you why I don't like the draw-through sharpeners. I do have a few around the house because my wife's not real good at sharpening a knife, and she uses some of the knives in the kitchen, and they get dull, and she wants to just be able to touch them up. I don't like them for constant sharpening. Touching up occasionally is okay. I don't like them for just, that's the only thing I sharpen with, because it takes a lot of metal off the blade and you will wear out the blade much faster. I've got some pocket knives. Before I really knew how to sharpen a knife, let me see if I've got one in this pocket. I believe I do. That I'm just now getting the nicks worked out, because they will nick up a blade if you don't know what you're doing. And I've got some, the blades are shorter. This one's not too bad. That blade's not too bad. This one, I did kind of chip up the tip, but this used to be probably 1/8 of an inch, at least a 1/16 further down here. I put a lot of wear on it using a draw-through Smith sharpener. Gets a nice sharp edge, but it takes a lot of metal off the blade. This one, you can tell it's been sharpened a lot, and it was done with a draw-through. Now I use stones. It should last quite a while, but that blade used to be about that much longer. I took a lot of steel off on those draw-through sharpeners. So keep that in mind. Draw-through sharpeners are cheap. Draw-through sharpeners will put a nice, quick, sharp edge on a knife. They'll certainly work in a pinch, but they will wear out your blade faster. They will not give as uniform, as nice of an edge. If you stop halfway through, you will put a nick in the blade that you will have a hard time getting out later. But they will work in a pinch. If that's all you've got, if that's all you're comfortable with, fine, keep doing it that way. But I would encourage everyone to learn how basic sharpening. It will work, again, with chisels, with axes. The principles that I told you, you got a hatchet, you've got an axe, mark it up, take a file. Take all that black off. Do it again. Take a rough stone. Same thing, mark it up. Take all that black off. Mark it up. Take all that black off. You probably don't want to go much more than the rough stone for an axe, for a hatchet. But remember, knives, axes, chisels cut more people when they're dull than they do when they're sharp. Because most people get cut when something slips off. When does something slip off? When it's not sharp enough to cut what you're trying to cut. It slips, and then it cuts. I know from which I speak. You see that scar? Had a knife slip while I was gutting a deer, cut myself all the way through. Fortunately, the bone stopped the blade, so I didn't cut my thumb off. That's what I told the nurse anyway when she was stitching me up. But, nurse practitioner, ended up with 5 stitches, opening day of deer season. Put me out of commission for a few days. Wasn't real happy about that, but it was my own fault. I let a knife slip. I had my hand in front of the blade. I shouldn't have. But it's a lesson learned. I took a knife straight out of the package thinking it's sharp enough. It wasn't. It slipped. It cut me. A sharp knife cuts a lot fewer people than a dull one. A sharp axe the same way. A sharp chisel the same way. Any cutting tool you want as sharp as you can get it, so that it cuts the material and doesn't slide off and cut you. I've heard guys say, I've got this Buck 110 folder and it has cut rope, cut stakes, and cut me. And everyone's been cut by a pocket knife if you've had one long enough. I've also gotten some stitches in one of my thumbs from cutting a hose. Rolling the hose like this, it slipped all the way through. Again, I keep my knives very sharp. So all that said, to be careful when you're sharpening a knife. It would be very easy to cut yourself. You must be careful. I would recommend wearing glasses because you don't know the quality of your blade. Even a really good blade can have a flaw in it. You're putting pressure on it. You chip it. Where's that chip going to go? I don't know. Do you? You don't know. It could go into your eye. You only have 2. We only have 2. So protect them. Also, you've got some dust and particulates. That's another reason to use water or oil, something to keep some of that down. But you've got some metal particles you don't want to get in your eyes. So use some safety equipment. Nothing wrong with putting on a pair of gloves when you're sharpening knives. They will affect your feel. You will have to learn how to find that edge by feel. But nothing wrong, especially on the one that's holding the stone, to have a cutting edge knife, a fiberglass type glove, something, a gauntlet, just something. Some people have stones with shields, something like that, just to protect the hand that's holding the stone. Keep your legs, your stomach, whatever. You see guys sitting in deer camp, they got their stone on their leg and they're sharpening away. We don't even think about it. I have, on at least one occasion, watched a guy slip the knife, go through his jeans, and put a cut down his leg. He didn't end up with stitches. It wasn't very deep, but it could have been much worse. So think safety. Be careful. Learn how to sharpen your own knives. Take pride in your own things. Take pride in your own workmanship. It's something as simple as sharpening a knife. If you've never done it before and you get it nice and sharp, you're going to appreciate that. It's a skill that you can use for a long, long time, and it's a skill that you can pass on to other family members. So this is Veteran Outdoorsman. God bless you all. Remember, Christ is King, and we'll catch you later.